Every year, billions of dollars in contracts are signed across Africa. Roads, hospitals, ports. The cargo manifests say the equipment arrived. The bills of lading say the steel was delivered. But walk the site, and there's nothing there. I'm Christopher Itekboy, a maritime economist, and this is the billion-dollar betrayals of Africa. Across Africa, governments sign contracts. Roads, hospitals, schools, power plants. The projects are announced with fanfare, ribbon-cutting ceremonies, press releases, promises of transformation. Then the money moves, and somewhere between the signing and the delivery, it vanishes. The African Union estimates that corruption drains $148 billion from the continent every year. That's half of Africa's total annual infrastructure financing gap. These aren't isolated incidents. They are a system, and this system has a playbook. This series follows the money through the ports, the procurement offices, and the paper trails that make the invisible visible. The playbook is remarkably consistent, and it works across sectors. Step 1. A government awards a contract, sometimes for infrastructure, sometimes for security equipment, sometimes for energy projects. The contract looks legitimate, there's a budget line, there's a signed agreement, there are even invoices. Step 2. The price gets inflated, not by 10 or 20%. Procurement audits across the continent have documented markups of 300, 500, sometimes 900%. A road that should cost $10 million is billed at $50 million, a hospital at $80 million instead of $15 million. Step 3. Shell companies enter the picture, entities registered offshore, in jurisdictions where ownership records are not public. These companies bill the government for services or supplies. The payments go out, but what comes back is often degraded, incomplete, or entirely fictional. Step 4. The delivery never arrives, or it arrives as something else, a half-built structure, equipment that doesn't function, a fleet of vehicles that exist only on paper, and by the time anyone checks, the money has passed through too many layers to trace. The World Bank estimates that globally, $120 billion is lost annually to procurement fraud alone. A disproportionate share of that loss lands in Africa, not because corruption is African, but because oversight systems have been systematically weakened. Consider what this means on the ground. A road contract is signed, the budget is allocated. Construction is supposed to begin within 6 months. 3 years later, the road remains unpaved. The contractor has been paid in full. The local community, farmers who needed that road to get crops to market, families who needed it to reach the nearest hospital, is still waiting. This is not hypothetical. Infrastructure monitoring groups have documented thousands of stalled or ghost projects across the continent. The same pattern appears in health, in education, in energy. A hospital is commissioned, ground is broken, equipment is ordered. 5 years later, the building stands half-finished. Exposed rebar, empty window frames, no staff, no patients. The procurement records show full payment to the contractor. The contractor's company no longer exists. School buildings face the same fate. Governments announce construction programs, hundreds of schools, thousands of classrooms. Budgets are approved. Years later, investigators find empty sites or structures so poorly built they're unsafe for students. The common thread isn't the sector, it's the gap between what was paid for and what was delivered. This is where my expertise comes in, and it reveals something most analyses miss. Every government project that involves imported materials passes through a port. Construction equipment, medical supplies, school furniture, electrical infrastructure, power generation components. All of it arrives by sea. In maritime logistics, every shipment generates documentation, bills of lading, cargo manifests, customs declarations, certificates of origin, insurance records. These documents record what was shipped, from where, by whom, to whom, on what vessel, at what value. When a government claims it paid $50 million for construction materials, the maritime record should show those materials being loaded, shipped, and discharged. The weight, the volume, the container numbers, the delivery dates. And when it doesn't, when the paperwork shows $5 million worth of materials where $50 million was billed, you're looking at the mechanism in real time. The ports don't lie, but they only speak when someone asks. So why doesn't someone ask? In many cases, the institutions designed to ask have been deliberately hollowed out. Audit offices are underfunded. Anti-corruption agencies lack prosecutorial power. Whistleblower protection laws exist on paper, but not in practice. The 2003 United Nations Convention Against Corruption, ratified by nearly every African nation, established frameworks for prevention, criminalization, and asset recovery. But ratification and implementation are different things. When an auditor digs too deep, the consequences are predictable. Budgets get cut, careers end. In the most serious cases, personal safety becomes a concern. The message spreads fast. Ask the wrong questions and you'll be removed from the room where they're asked. The result is a culture of looking away, not because individuals are corrupt, but because the cost of integrity has been deliberately raised. The human cost is documented, not in anecdotes, but in aggregate outcomes measured across decades. The African Development Bank has found that corruption adds a corruption tax of up to 20% on public procurement across the continent, meaning governments get roughly 80 cents of value for every dollar spent. Those differential compounds year after year. When a road isn't built, farmers lose access to markets. Crop yields may be strong, but post-harvest losses spike because produce can't reach buyers before it spoils. The farmer absorbs the loss. The contractor keeps the payment. When a hospital isn't completed, maternal mortality rates don't improve. Treatable conditions become fatal. The distance to the nearest functioning facility determines outcomes, and the money that was supposed to close that distance has already disappeared. These are not separate problems. They are the same problem, measured in different units. Here's the paradox at the heart of this story. Corruption leaves a trail. Every inflated contract produces documentation. Every shell company leaves a registration record. Every diverted payment passes through a banking system. Every undelivered shipment leaves a gap in the maritime record. The information exists. It sits in procurement databases, audit reports, customs records, and financial disclosures. It crosses borders because the offshore structures used to hide assets depend on jurisdictions that keep records of their own. The challenge isn't finding the information. It's creating the conditions in which people feel safe enough to act on it. The pattern will continue as long as the cost of looking exceeds the cost of looking away. Changing that equation isn't just a governance problem. It's an accountability problem. And accountability requires an audience. And Africa's development isn't held back by a lack of ambition, a lack of talent, or a lack of resources. It's held back by systems designed to divert those resources before they reach their intended destination. Roads not built, hospitals not completed, schools that exist only in budget documents, millions of people whose daily lives are shaped by the gap between what was promised and what was delivered. This isn't one country's story. It isn't one sector's story. It's a continental pattern, and patterns can be broken, but only when enough people decide to follow the paper trail. I'm Chris. This has been the $1 Billion Betrayals of Africa. Until the next episode.